Thanks for tuning in to the Boardroom. We are currently streaming across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Thanks for joining us. I'm getting a little bit of an echo, just to mention. Oh, thank you. So this is New Jersey School Boards Association, an attempt to be transparent, to have transparent conversations with all of you. So we hope that you utilize this time to call in with a question. I think we're getting a lot of feedback here. Hold on one second. Is that better? Yeah. We hope you can call in with any question. It could be anything about the association. At the association, transparency isn't just a buzzword. It's our framework of being. And today we have a special guest with us, Gwen Thornton, our Director of Field Services. Gwen, great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Do you mind sharing with our viewers a little bit about what you do and how it relates to the work that we do?
Okay, so field services, I'm hoping that most of you listening know who your field service representative is. And we provide direct supports to boards at your board meetings, to individual board members, board officers, through consultations, conversations, and we're here to help you be the most effective boards and teams that you can be in collaboration with your superintendent and all of your educational leaders and community members and stakeholders.
Excellent. Thank you, Gwen. Great to have you on the show.
Good to be here.
So today, I think a thread of our conversation today, and correct me if I'm wrong, is one of board governance.
Absolutely.
So the work you do to support boards in their role, and these are such difficult times to navigate for our board presidents, for our board members. So again, call in anytime with a question. We're going to put the number on the screen here for you. And I'll read it as well. 609-278-5292. Call in with any question. It could be related to field services, or it could be anything related to New Jersey School Boards Association. We'd love to hear from you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the support that you provide your boards, and maybe even include some concerns that you're hearing from the field.
Sure. It is a challenging time. I was a board member for 10 years in Somerset County, and I've been doing this work with the association for the past 20 plus years.
How did you find out about this work here at school boards? So you were serving as a board member.
I was serving as a board member. We had a wonderful field service representative who used to come in and work with our board during challenging times. We had some construction going on that was very challenging. We had some superintendent turnover. We had a need to redistrict in our district. It's a large district. And so there were a number of issues. And as a community member and as a board member then, I became familiar with NJSBA. I found the services to be so incredibly helpful to our board in terms of improving our governance and working as a team. The challenges are different today. There's no question about it. But a lot of the fundamentals remain the same. What does good governance look like in terms of setting goals, which your field service rep can help you accomplish, typically done in the May, June, July timeframe for the following school year, whether it's talking about how can we make our meetings more effective through the use of parliamentary procedure, how can we engage our stakeholders in our communities, which I think is one of the key issues that's out there, so that parents know that they do have a voice, have always had a voice. That's not changed, but making sure that we are reaching not only out to parents, but also to your community members, to your municipalities, to your governmental officials at all levels. And we have a wonderful advocacy department that can assist you with that as well. But really getting our message out there about the value of public education, which is so important for all students, and making sure we're providing the greatest number of opportunities for all students in your district, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in terms of extra or co-curricular programming. How are we meeting them where they are and helping you to take them to where they need to go? And I think that's so fundamental, and that's what's so valuable about NJSBA, is that we are committed to helping you do what you need to do and doing it effectively as a Board of Education and as a school district.
One of the components of your answer that you just provided was related to communication, and dare I say, transparent conversations with your community. And I liked what you said. You started off with the importance of goal setting. And we know that we'll get into strategic planning in a bit, but goal setting your goals for the year, Covey says, begin with the end in mind. Talk about a little bit more about that important step in the process of, having boards set their goals for the year.
Well, it's a matter of establishing what are our priorities, what are our greatest needs, depending upon your educational leaders to help you through that process, because they know, because they administer the district on a day-to-day basis, what's most critically important for student success. And all of the elements of a district contribute to student success, whether it's the type of facilities you have, whether it's you're able to bus them in time, whether we need to be providing them food, so in the morning, breakfast before the bell, so they could learn. All of those are really critical needs. So setting those goals upfront for the year helps your entire staff, as well as your community, your parents, to know what your focus is and what your goal is at the end of the day. What do we hope to accomplish? And I think you can pull goals. If you have a strategic plan in place, you can pull your annual goals right from that. If you don't, it's even more important then to have those conversations as a full board, with community input, with your administration, to identify what we need to focus on. What do we need? What do we do well? What can we do better? You can have a goal, but a goal without a plan is nothing but a wish.
Yeah.
So making sure that you've given your administrative team time to develop an action plan that will allow you to move from where you are to where you want to be, or at least closer to where you want to be. Also, in education, as in many fields, goals are multi-year. It's going to take a while to accomplish those goals. So having a long-range plan in place allows you to sort of chunk what you're going to do year over year to get closer to what you need to accomplish.
Yeah. I'm reminded of one of Yogi Berra's quotes. If you don't know where you're going, you'll wind up somewhere else.
That's very funny, because actually we used to have a slide in our goal setting PowerPoint that quotes that with a picture of Yogi Berra.
That's funny. I love how inherent in your response you mentioned about looking at the needs, right? So Sean Covey, I'm thinking of his book, 4 Disciplines of Execution. That's a good one for our listeners to look up. And in the book, he establishes something called wildly important goals. And he says, there's a whirlwind of issues that we face. And, certainly now we're facing a lot of issues in public education. But, what is the single most important goal that we can strive to attain? And like you said, it may not be 1 year, it could be multiple years, but that would have the most impact on our students, positively. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, I think our viewers would love to hear a little bit about some of the challenges or some of the concerns that you're hearing from the field right now. So what are some of the hotbed issues that our local boards of education are, coming across now? What are the challenges they're facing?
So I think some of the challenges revolve around the varying levels of state support for education and what its impact is, particularly for K-8 districts and the smaller K-12 districts. Because it's been variable year over year, it becomes difficult to plan for the future, because you don't know. There's no ability to know far in advance what funding will look like. So making sure that you have those adequate resources to be able to achieve your goals. And how do we do that when we can't depend necessarily on increasing levels of support? So it's really, taking the time to think carefully about what are those priorities that will make the greatest impact, and how can we as a board and a district plan effectively for that? And that can be a challenge, because boards are dealing with 3 budgets all year long. You have the audit from last year's budget. You're doing the current operating budget, and then you're trying to look 18 months out at the next budget. So, I think that that's a real concern for a lot of school districts. Also, clearly, some of the changes in the New Jersey student learning standards have raised concerns for some boards of education, and I think we're seeing cultural divides within communities that we haven't seen heretofore, and that makes a challenge as well. So looking at governance and how can we come to consensus. What unites us is greater than what divides us as supporters of public education, because ultimately our goals are all the same. I think. And that fundamental goal is to make sure we're providing students with what they need to be successful in the 21st century for jobs and careers that you and I can't even envision at this
That's
point
right,
in
yeah.
time. And so, how do we do that? We have to learn to work together to develop consensus, to have thoughtful conversations, to meet those challenges. And I think we need to continually educate our parents and our communities around the good work that's being done and the successes that we've had. And being, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We have to be able to talk about where we haven't found success. Where are those gaps? How do we close them? Whether they're achievement gaps, whether they're gaps in the facilities that we provide, that they're not up to speed or that they need remediation. And so there are a lot of ways to do those kinds of things, but I think it's critically important to have those hard conversations at the board table. And I think it truly goes back to that piece about transparency, about being honest and direct and forthright with your community and your stakeholders so they know where you are.
Yeah.
And establishing relationships with the people who have an influence over what you can and can't do, your legislators, your town council, and looking at how do we share services, for example, to accommodate some of those challenges that we may face financially. And then also, another topic we're hearing out there is regionalization. There was a fundamental change in the legislation that provided some financial resources for districts looking at regionalization. And I think that that's an option that some districts are looking at currently. And I think that that can cause a lot of public consternation. So really communicating effectively why it is you're looking at it, what you hope to come out of that kind of regionalization study with, and that there will be an opportunity because we have always advocated for it. It's been preserved in the law that the public has an opportunity to weigh in before anything changes. But I think that's a shift. New Jersey's always had a real commitment to home rule, and that's a difficult challenge for a lot of folks. They move to communities because they want their children in a particular district. So I think those are all things we're hearing out in the field, and I think board members are doing an extraordinary job in trying to respond to those things, and we're here to help you do that.
Let's dive deeper. You give us a lot there, by the way.
Sorry.
No, that was good. It was great. But let's dive into. I'm looking at this through three different lenses. Your response. The first, a funding lens. The second, more of and it's a little more inclusive. Difficult conversations or promoting an environment where community members feel heard and supported. And then the last one, the regionalization issue. So let's dive into all three. Let's start with the funding. And you mentioned the volatility, and I want to put a plug in for our governmental relations team. I'll give you an example with the formula where it goes off property values. We're advocating for a 3-year average rather than, a single
Year over
year.
year, I know.
And that would allow districts to be able to forecast better. And I think it would, limit the large swings, back and forth. It could be plus or minus in that case. But so funding, how are we supporting our districts, and how, if I'm listening right now or I'm tuning in right now, how can I get support from NJSBA? I know one, I'll share and you can add to it or give us other examples. But one, we have a business administrator in residence that our members can reach out to for guidance with questions.
Absolutely. And he's got a wealth of knowledge from years of experience and can be very helpful in talking through various solutions and various options that a district might have in terms of what to do next, which is always a challenge. And I think that that's one source. I think reaching out to our GR department as well, and letting them know what the challenges are that you face so that we have a good handle on all of the various permutations, because every district has an individual set of circumstances.
Yeah.
Even within the same county, there are lots of variables. And so
And you can't assume that we know information. So letting us know what you're struggling with not only assists us in supporting you, but better informs the work that we do statewide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think those are some ways. Again, if we can get some of those changes that would be helpful to districts, it's certainly something that everyone here is working toward. And a shout out to GR for continuing to do that, because it takes time and it takes patience.
Mm.
But hopefully, they'll look at the formula again and make the kind of tweaks perhaps or changes that would be beneficial to all school districts. Because we represent all school districts, large ones, small ones, wealthy
That's
ones,
right.
ones with less socioeconomic wealth. And every child, regardless of zip code, is entitled to a quality education, and we want to make sure that that happens.
Well said. Again, you can call in with any question at 609-278-5292. We'd love to hear from you. You can ask any question related to, our topic of discussion, or it could be related to anything regarding New Jersey School Boards Association. So let's move into the second, I think, theme in your your initial response there, and that is either facilitating or opening conversations with their community. And I'll share a little nugget, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'm thinking back to, there were some issues in the state related to the school academic calendar, like so the calendar and holidays. And my lens of the situation, of course, this is my personal belief, was that some of the issues that some districts faced had less to do with the actual issue, in this case, a calendar, and more to do with transparency and having conversations so that community members felt like they were well informed, or at least informed. Let's not say well informed, but at least they had information, or they had an opportunity to share information. So talk a little bit about, how can boards create an environment where their community feels heard, but still, be able to get through their governance, get through their agenda.
So one of the most difficult challenges, I think, for communities is their understanding of what the purpose of a Board of Education meeting is. And essentially, a Board of Education meeting is a meeting of the board in public with the opportunity for the public to comment on the conduct of the district's business. But it is not meant as an open forum or a dialogue. And I think members of the community become very frustrated by that. So we, talk to boards all the time about creating those opportunities for the public to be heard on a myriad of issues that they may be concerned about, whether it's the calendar, whether it's adding an additional sport, whether, whatever their concerns happen to be at a particular period of time, is to provide that opportunity for a forum with the Board of Education, facilitated and attended, obviously, by your educational leaders who have facts and in-depth knowledge regarding those issues.
What are some best practices where boards create that
So
balance?
a lot of boards will have coffee and conversation with the superintendent and a couple of board members. Some will do it as a public forum, an open public board meeting, if you will, with no other agenda other than to allow the public to provide input, especially if they're making a change, if they're looking at changing school hours, for example. Which impacts every family and every community
That's
when
right.
they change school hours. And we know from medical research that it's probably beneficial for students at the high school level to start later, but it impacts everybody all the way down to pre-K.
That's right,
Because
yeah.
now everyone's hours have to shift. Parents probably may not know that having a 3-tier bus system where buses run 3 times is more economical and affordable for a school district, and can happen based on current school hours. And if you changed it dramatically, it might impact the number of runs that a bus company could do or the district buses could do. I know that's sort of getting into the weeds, but it's a great example of sometimes there are effects of a change in a district that everyone might not understand, that there could be financial impacts, staffing impacts. And so having to look and educate your public and get that information out to them is critically important. We have to meet the public where they are, not where we are. I think that's districts have wonderful social media pages as well as their district website, because sometimes parents don't go to the district website. But how do we meet them where they are? So going
That's a
out
great
into
point.
the community
Yep.
and meeting them where they are at a given point in time. When are they going to congregate? Where would it be helpful to speak to them? I had a superintendent who used to routinely go out to a school drop-off at an elementary school and would have conversations with parents after they were out of the road of the buses with parents,
Well, that's an important
to
point.
be able to
Yeah.
talk to them and hear what they were talking about.
Yeah.
What were they thinking about? So there are lots of different
Yeah.
ways to be able to do that. But I think boards have to be very clear that they have to provide those opportunities separate and apart from a regular board meeting. Not that we always welcome the community to come to a board meeting, see what's going on, but to allow them to get their questions answered and to be heard
Now, I know
and seen.
some boards operate with committee of the whole,
Yes.
but talk a little bit for our viewers who may not know when a board operates in committee and how the committees work as opposed to the board operating as a committee of the whole. Yeah.
So committees really allow boards to dive a little deeper into the particular areas. Um, Many districts operate with committees, especially larger ones. Smaller districts are oftentimes those districts with committee of the whole. Committees look at it at the topics in that particular area. Let's take, for example, curriculum and instruction. So they will look at the recommendations and discuss changes to textbooks, new staffing, new programming, whatever the pieces are that they need to be looking at, and then they recommend to the full board. But no committee has the authority to bind a board. It just is a way of getting more information, fully vetting it, and then making a recommendation to the board. And then the full board has an opportunity to ask questions and discuss it before coming to a decision. Only the full board of any district has, a majority of the full board has the right to bind a district to activity. And so committees can be very helpful. It's also a wonderful way for new board members to learn more about the operation of a school district than they may come on to the board with, and to explore those different areas in greater depth.
Yeah. And I'd recommend those who are listening who are possibly a board president, I recommend from my personal experience that you create some sort of template for each of your committees to use, so that when they report out, a board member who may not be part of a particular committee is able to understand what's going on. Because the fear is that something occurred, although, Gwen, you're obviously correct in that no decisions are binding and made in that committee, but sometimes they may feel like they don't have all of the information, they missed something. And of course, they couldn't be there due to quorum, but having some sort of standard reporting process or maybe even a template, I think then allows all of the board members to know. And I think it's imperative you get that information out ahead of the board meeting. I know there's time at the board meeting for those committee reports, but you want those other board members to feel like they have information.
Well, we didn't coordinate this, but now that Dr. Purnell mentions it, we actually have a template that is standardized that your field service representative can share with you, so that you can adopt it or customize it to your particular needs. But it's a template, and it does highlight the topics that were covered, who was present, time the meeting started, time the meeting was over, what the recommendations were that are going to the board, what was discussed and not recommended, so that board members have a full
Equally
understanding
important there. Yeah.
of everything that transpired. And again, also, here's what's next. We anticipate taking up next month, so that if any board members want to add a topic to that committee agenda. The wonderful thing about having a committee system is that it does allow a board to ensure that an idea has been properly vetted and looked at from every angle. And I'll go back to the shifting school times. It would need to run through multiple committees on a Board of Education to look at what's its educational impact,
That's right.
what's the facilities impact,
Yep.
what is the finance impact, what does it do to the budget,
Or the sports and curricular.
or what does it do to the co-curricular
Yep.
program?
Yeah.
And then, that's a topic, for example, that really does need lots of input because, when you shift school start times, for example, it impacts preschool care, the after-school care
That's right.
program, it impacts parents' work time, stop time, child care coverage. So all of those pieces have to be looked at and could run through multiple committees before the board would make a decision. But when you have committees, if something pops up under new business, the appropriate response is to assign it to committee so that it can be looked at in greater depth. And then the board is not put in the position of trying to make a decision without sufficient information.
Yeah.
And the community feels heard. We all want you to look at this. Okay. And we brought it up during public comment, and a board member says, well, I think we should adopt this tonight. it needs to go to committee.
That's right.
And that protects the board. It also protects the parents because now you've gone through and examined it fully and or the community members, and you've vetted it fully before the board comes back and says, okay, here's what
Right.
we've looked at, here's what we're recommending, and here's why.
And I know some of my employees will chuckle with this one, but there's strength in the process, right? And
Yes.
sometimes you need to go through that process. We want to be at the end, right? But there's strength in the process. That's why, to me, it's so important. Even when you look at a policy, a board's policy, you aren't doing first and second reading at one meeting. What's the point of that? The point is to be able to have a first reading at one meeting, and then be able to digest that information, and then have your second reading. I mean, there's a purpose to having something run through the proper process, and I think you laid out a great example of how that would look, and that is transparent to the community. So even if you're not on the Board of Education, you know that this topic has been discussed and not just raised by a board member at a meeting with anticipation of a vote of changing start times. Yeah, well said. Now, the third theme you had mentioned was regionalization. So if we could talk a little bit about that. In New Jersey, we have so many school districts. We have local autonomy, local control, but you are seeing in the field some pressure or some interest even by boards to look at this regionalization model.
Yeah, we are seeing that interest, and part of that interest is driven by this change in legislation, and part of that legislation provided state funding to do a regionalization study so that it doesn't cost the taxpayers additional money. So a lot of boards are doing it not because they are supportive necessarily at this point in time of becoming a regional district, but because they want to see what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, what are the costs, what are the pluses, what are the minuses. And I think that that is very helpful to your communities to see that the
Yeah.
board is doing its due diligence. It's really looking at it and saying, does it help the curriculum if we are K-12 instead of a K-8 because we can align our curriculum and go all the way through?
Yeah.
What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? What are the pluses? And then talking about it. And those studies are all, of course, made public so that the public can read them and understand them. And it's a helpful discussion to have.
Yeah.
We have 500 plus districts. We have some really tiny districts that are struggling both academically. And by that, I mean, offering a broad-based curriculum is difficult when you only have one section of first grade, one section of eighth grade. It can be difficult socially for students to have such a limited schedule
Yeah.
and not be able to provide the kind of co-curricular experiences or enrichment experiences, field trips, STEM competitions, all of the kinds of things, robotics that districts love and enrich kids' lives and help them. So it's not just driven by economics, but I think it's also driven by educational needs. And I think that's why a lot of districts are looking at that because there is now some state funding available for both the studies. And if you put it to a public vote, there's help for that as well, for that election, costs being covered.
Related to the example you gave, but actually even much broader, is this notion of when that topic is voted upon or when it comes to the public, being able to say and control the narrative that we had some tough conversations about this topic, and maybe we were divided, or maybe we looked at this, we looked at that. When you communicate and indicate to the community that, hey, we looked at this from multiple lens diagnostic, here's where we landed. We heard your concerns, X, Y, and Z. I think that is also a powerful element rather than just, go sweeping through something. If it's a topic of such magnitude, such as regionalization
absolutely.
or such as start times. And so I think that's another important component of the narrative.
It is. And I think
Because-
it goes to transparency
Yeah.
and effective communication. And I think communities really have an absolute right to expect that level of transparency. And while you are wonderful volunteers, you're also responsible for a lot of, there are two things we ask people to give us, right, in our lifetimes as public officials: their taxes, their money, and their children. Hopefully, children are more important. So you do have that fiduciary responsibility to make sure that you are being good stewards of the tax dollars and the state dollars that you're given to run your district, to provide that quality education for kids. And so,
Yeah.
I think as public officials, we have that obligation.
Well said. We do have a question online.
Okay.
So we have a question from Stephanie through YouTube. Is it okay for there to be some conversation during public comment if we control it?
Typically, boards have policy that say that if it's a district-wide question that the superintendent can answer, and he has the information or she has the information available to them, most superintendents will respond at that meeting. Sometimes the community may have questions that requires additional study or research because you don't want to be in the position of giving an incomplete or potentially inaccurate response just because you don't have that data accessible to you at the board table. Um, in terms of effective board governance, because it's a meeting of the board in public, but it is a meeting of the board to conduct its business.
Yeah.
Getting into a back and forth with community members is really not beneficial to a Board of Education. And so typically, again, it's important that if someone has a question that needs to be responded to, that they get a response. It
Yeah.
might not be at the meeting.
It could be followed up after. the meeting.
Follow-up is critically important. And for that, typically, it is your administrators that will follow up with a member of the community to address their concern. And that's beneficial as well. But again, you probably have board policy that says the board president is the spokesperson for the board.
That's right.
And it makes no sense to try to respond to a question that you don't have accurate, complete information to. So rather than do that, following up is
Yeah.
a much more effective practice for board governance.
Let me ask another question, just in case it's the genesis of Stephanie's question. If a board decides that they want to put a discussion topic on the board meeting, or they want input, or they have a field service representative come in to assist them in gathering input, is that something you could see happening if it's controlled?
Absolutely, that can happen. And I think a facilitated discussion is always beneficial to the board. Again, in all likelihood, the board's going to sit and listen to the discussion from the community. Public comment is the public's opportunity to be heard and to comment at a Board of Education meeting. And oftentimes, because board members do spend so many hours and are so committed to the work they do, it is very easy to become defensive.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so
Right, right.
sometimes you end up not really answering the public's comment or question, but seeming defensive.
And
So
a
it's-
lot of that has to do with procedural, right? So they question the procedural
Yes.
component of it, whereas the board member may feel, well, look, you elected me, or I was appointed, depending on the type district, to serve in this capacity. And sometimes the board member may feel there should be a respect to them for their position, that they have followed the proper procedure or have done a lot of work. But that's not always intuitive of the people that attend. They don't really necessarily. So you shouldn't assume that they know everything that you went through as a board member to make a
Exactly.
decision.
Exactly.
Question about strategic planning. How important is that process for districts? Should they have that done? How often should they have that done? Especially now in a world where every year you and I always joke about there's new jobs that we haven't even thought of. What is your perspective on strategic planning? And maybe give some advice to our listeners.
Sure. So I think looking at strategic planning and having a long-range plan in place is really a process that has great benefits to all aspects of the district, but also to the community, because it gives an opportunity for the community's voice to be heard. What do you as a community think are the greatest challenges facing the districts? What are the strengths you see that currently exist in the district? Where are we? What is our vision for that future that is out there? And coming to a shared vision of what we want this district to be doing and what we should have and provide for our students, what education looks like in our district, what does it need to look like in the future. All of those are pieces, inviting your community in, and I mean all stakeholders, the naysayers, But particularly preschool parents who may not even have kids in your district yet, parents of current students, parents who have students who have graduated and gone on, senior citizens, the ministerium, the rabbinical council, your faith group leaders, your municipal leaders, town council, your mayors, having the police and fire department. Everyone has a different perspective. And hearing all of those perspectives coming to
Yep.
consensus around what are going to be our priorities. I think doing it every 3 to 5 years, I think 5 years at this point is a stretch
Yeah.
because things change so dramatically.
That's good
Um,
advice.
So I
Yeah.
think looking at it and doing that, it's a wonderful opportunity too for a new superintendent who may be new to your district, new to your community, to have an opportunity to
That's a
reach
great
out and work with the public on a strategic plan, because they'll get to know the person, and the person will have a better sense of the entire community. So it's a wonderful transitional activity for boards that may have a new soup.
I, I think you really made some solid points there about the importance of the work. We need to lead differently today, and having the different lenses as part of the process is so important because we get stuck in, Ronald Heifetz talks about the balcony perspective in his book, Leadership Without Easy Answers. And we get stuck with our lens. We get so wrapped up, but we need to put ourselves on the balcony, and having that multiple lens diagnostic of, like you said, the chief of police, whoever it might be at the table to give input into the process, I think is so important for its success.
I did a strategic plan once, helped a colleague, and I was sitting waiting for it to begin, and I was talking with a gentleman, and we were sitting in this lovely room that was the all-purpose room of an elementary district with it had an entire wall of windows, and it was spectacular. And it was springtime. And I said to him, "Oh, it is so nice for the kids. They can eat here. They can look out the window. It's just so uplifting." And he looked at me and he said, "Ma'am, it's my worst nightmare." I said, "I beg your pardon?" He said, "I'm the chief of police. There's parking spots right out there, and anyone could drive a car right through that window." Now,
Wow.
that was a completely different
Perspective,
lens
yeah.
that I had, and it has always struck me and stayed with me because I thought, "Oh, I never even thought of that," which I didn't. And I'm a parent and a grandparent, but it just hadn't occurred to me. When the strategic plan was done and I went back in with a colleague to deliver the plan, there were ballards in front of that window so that no car could get
Look at that. Yeah,
and that
Wow.
was a direct result
that's right.
of that person's participation in the strategic plan. He saw it differently than
Yeah.
I saw it, than their educational leaders had seen it. And it was built obviously before, recent years where we had to be concerned about those kinds of behaviors and things happening. So I think that is the value.
Yeah.
Truly, we all see things differently, and we can look at the same thing and see much different things.
And we always at New Jersey School Boards Association, we talk about the table and how we encourage differences of opinion, because that's a perfect example. It makes us stronger. I want to shift to the purpose of a strategic plan. I'm always reminded of, Simon Sinek's why. And this is why we do what we do. And leading with the why is so important. So if you've attended a New Jersey School Board's meeting or an event, you've probably heard me say content, connection, advocacy. Those are our 3 strategic priorities, our pillars. And so when you lead with the why, and obviously I get into further detail, but you lead with the why, people are gravitating, they really want to be part of that, right? So they're attracted to the mission, they're attracted to the vision, you know. And I think that's so important for districts as they embark on this process to keep that in mind. And so I love when districts come out with really nice infographics at the end and buckets and really because it brings a lot of pride to the work.
It does.
And then you see it in the classrooms, so you get it all the way down to the classrooms. But I think this whole getting the voices at the table is so important, that we lead. I always use this with my staff, but top-down leadership is not sufficient for regenerative companies or districts or communities or nonprofits. We need to listen to the voices and get those at the table. And I think, our process at school board certainly does that for strategic planning. I'd encourage you to, if you're interested in this or you're embarking on a new strategic plan, contact our field service representatives and at least consider us, as a partner in the process.
And I would add, and I should have said this when I was enumerating all the various kinds of stakeholders, a really important piece is to have students participate.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're our ultimate consumer.
Right.
They're the ones that
Yeah.
benefit or not benefit from what it is we do or don't do.
And it also reminds us why we're doing this.
And it gives us
Yeah.
a real eye-opening reminder of why we do this.
That's right.
Right? Because they're what counts, and that's who we need to serve.
If you'd like to call in, we'd love to hear a question from you. We'll put the number there on the screen, but it's 609-278-5292. Call in with any question. It could be related to our topics or it could be anything related to the association. I want to shift to a different topic. And I know this one is a hot topic. It's related to social media and even artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
How important is, and we can go in different directions here with this topic, but how important is having a strong policy related to this for districts?
I think it's critically important because I think everyone absolutely needs to know what the expectations are, what is acceptable, and what's not. So most boards, obviously, because it's required, have adopted social media policies for students, social media policies for staff.
Mm.
However, many boards have adopted a social media policy for their boards of education because that is not mandated, it's not required. However, it does demonstrate to both your staff, your students, and your community that you are committed to responsible use of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's critically important. We need to model the behavior that we expect of our students.
Mm.
And so I think it's critically important to do that. Social media can be a wonderful tool for disseminating information, but it also can be a very damaging tool depending upon how it's utilized.
What about board members who have a personal account and
Certainly, you can have a personal account, but what I will tell you is that board business appropriately needs to be discussed at the board table. We have an open public meetings law, or commonly called the Sunshine Law, and the notion is that the public has an absolute right to observe you deliberating and doing your business.
Mhm.
So when you are discussing board business on social media, they're only getting your personal perspective, and it goes back to that multi-lens piece. They have a right to see everyone's lens and perspective that is participating as a Board of Education member. Unfortunately, some board members have gotten themselves caught in great controversy as well as personal difficulties through utilization of social media. So if I had my druthers, I would say, don't use it for board business. You want to post where you went to dinner, what your child is the star basketball player. I'm all about that. That's wonderful.
That's right. Yeah.
But district business should be discussed at the board table and not on social media.
Well said. Thank you. What about new members? So new Board of Education members that are coming on. How are ways that field services can support them in their onboarding?
So I think onboarding is critically important for new board members. It's a change to your team. Anytime, you add someone, they may be replacing a beloved
Right.
incumbent that lost. They may be coming on because they have a particular perspective that you may or may not agree with. However, they come on and they have all of the rights and responsibilities of every other board member. So helping them to become acclimated to what's their appropriate roles, what are their responsibilities, what are the protocols and norms of how your board operates, what do you do best,
Right.
How do you get something on the agenda, what is the expectation for committee meetings, all of those pieces is helpful. So we can help, sometimes we'll go out to a district and do an onboarding workshop with the board as to, we have samples of wonderful onboarding programs we can share with your district. Sometimes we will encourage board members to establish a mentor program. someone that they can go to who sits on the board. All board members are always free to call us. Sometimes we have board members that call and say, they said I can't call NJSBA. You can always
That's
call
right.
NJSBA. You can always call your service representative. We will answer your questions. Sometimes board members may not like the answer we give them, but we will always be honest and direct with them so that they have a better understanding of what's they need to be doing or who they can talk to. And if I don't have an answer, if someone calls, I can point them in the direction to someone in the association that does, or I can help get them get that answer. I think that's one of our most important pieces for new folks, especially. There's no question that we're going to think is silly. We don't share your question with your superintendent or your business administrator or other board members or your board president. You can feel free to call us, and our conversations do not get shared with anyone else in your district or on your board. So I think that that's an important piece. Again, many districts will do their own individual district onboarding, meeting with the superintendent, meeting with the business administrator, the board president before reorganization. With the November election, because we have this period, I call it the interregnum, the period between two reigns, we have this extended
Love it.
we have this extended period of time between the election in November
Right.
and when you're sworn in to help get you ready to be up and running and going and hit the ground running. That's not something we used to have in April when you took a seat in May. It was 2 weeks later.
Right.
And we all look like deer in the headlights in the old days. But now we have that.
Time
And
to
so
prepare. Yeah.
setting up that meeting and meeting with your soup, meeting with the board president, so that you can really become familiar and comfortable. We can also provide you with all kinds of resources. So you should be able to look at and be familiar with your district's policy manual before you take your seat, the negotiated agreements you should have a copy of. I always suggest one way to get yourself up to speed is to go to your district's website and look at a year's worth of minutes. If you want to know where you are now, you can look about how did we get here? Well, here's what happened in the past year. Again, all kinds of things suggestions and tips and tricks that we can help get you set up for success.
I think it's a great point that your point of contact, your field service representative, is a wonderful point of contact. Of course, you can reach out at any time to the association. We're here to support. We've got avenues to support, whether it be the district is going through collective bargaining and you need up-to-date salary information from other districts. If you want to call the attorney of the day, if you want to call our business administrator in residence, but really a wonderful contact to put you in the right direction is that field service representative.
Absolutely.
So get to know your field service rep. We actually did an initiative last year, right, where we had each field service representative give a little personal video that we delivered to our new member inboxes so that you got to know them. But certainly that's a person that you could reach out to in full confidence and share any question and feel comfortable about sharing.
And I would also encourage your new folks, when they come on board, to attend new board member orientation. We offer 2 weekends, which are wonderful experiences. Doing it as soon as you possibly can, given your schedule, helps you to be a better board member sooner and to be a better educated board member. One of the things that's important for board members to know and to understand, it's about a continuous learning process. We tell our staff, we tell our students, you want to learn, to be a continual learner, to always be learning more. That's one of the reasons I love the work we do, because it's always different. I'm always learning new things that I didn't know before. And I think, getting into that mode is a good model for your students and your staff, but also helps you to be more effective sooner. So getting that training early on, I think, is key to success as well.
I want to talk a little bit about the county associations. One of our pillars at New Jersey School Boards Association is connection, and that's your sharing power, right? So that's connecting members throughout the state. We have a connections platform that you can log into. You can post a question, and within minutes, you'll get a response from another member who may be on the complete opposite geographically of the state and share information. We believe that sharing needs to continue, be ubiquitous. But the county association meetings are also another avenue where members can connect with one another. I always think of the famous violinist Isaac Stern, who once said, music happens between the notes. The importance of when you attend a conference and you've got two different sessions, but what happens in between the session, and the power that you have to engage with other members and share ideas and really come up with generative thinking. So the county meetings, how can a new member, say I'm tuning in right now, how do I get involved? Where do I find information? And how important is that information to the work I do at the local level?
So you can go to our website, and if you haven't, but I'm hoping most of you who are listening have, at www.njsba.org. Go to meetings. There's a drop down that will pop up. You'll be able to find your county. It will list all of on that county page. If you click there, it will list all the meeting dates. One of the wonderful pieces and the unintended outcomes of COVID is now we always allow attendance and not allow, what we have enabled you to attend any county meeting in any county, any of the 21 counties across the state. If there's a topic of interest to you, and you live in Cape May, but it's in Bergen County and you can't envision driving that far, which I don't blame you, you can listen, log in. There's no cost to your district. There's no cost to anyone, and listen to that meeting and benefit from whatever topic it is that they may be discussing. I would encourage you, for your local meetings that are close enough, go in person, because it's that networking opportunity to share with other board members across the state, across your county, your individual county or adjacent counties, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Another district may have already dealt with the concern or the challenge you're seeing.
That's right.
And learning what that's like. So those are wonderful. Right now, it's springtime. We are doing our spring celebration meetings at the county levels, celebrating boards that have become certified boards of education, members who have achieved certification levels through taking additional trainings. And that, again, speaks to that continuous learning piece. We've made available lots and lots of information and lots of opportunities for board members. There's also additionally webinars that are available that have been done, that have been taped on various topics. You can go, again, to our website, type in webinar, it'll pull up all of the recorded ones. Those are wonderful opportunities. You can listen to them in your jammies and slippers late at night, or, whenever is, or if you're sitting waiting for your child's after ballet lessons, whatever works for you in your schedule. We've tried to make it as available as we can to encourage that continuous learning for Board of Education members. And of course, I would be remiss if I failed to point out that in October, we have a workshop in Atlantic City that is second to none as the largest educational conference in the state, that has hundreds of learning opportunities for you, whether it's in action labs, group sessions, keynote speakers, going to the floor of the convention and talking to other board members, talking to vendors who provide services to districts. There are just 100,000 ways that you can learn information, and it's so beneficial, and it's a lot of fun too. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Actually, I'll put a plug in for our Unsung Heroes Awards. Those applications are due soon, and those who are selected are recognized at our workshop. But that's a way to recognize all of the people who don't necessarily get the recognition they deserve in your school communities, whether it be a crossing guard, a bus aide, school counselor, a nurse, teacher's assistant, public relations officer, and the list goes on. And it's on our website. But I'd recommend that you nominate someone who's really making an impact in children's lives. And this is a really wonderful moment where they receive that award in front of their peers and those attending. So you've got that custodian that goes the extra distance. Here's an opportunity to celebrate the contributions that they make to community.
And they are beyond thrilled for that recognition, because they do work so hard, and it is such a wonderful opportunity for them to be recognized and someone to say, thank you, you make a difference. And I think that's why boards are so fortunate, because, you may not think about it in the short term, but over the long term, when you serve on a board of education, you make a difference in the lives of students that will live long after your board service. And that's why it's so critically important to know and understand that, and to have that lens as you're making your decisions, keeping your policy in mind, keeping your budget in mind, but really keeping the students at the center and the heart of everything you do. Because at the end of the day, when you're long gone from your board service, no matter what that looks
We're all
like,
going to go at some point.
we're all going to at some point. Every day on this side of the grass is a good day.
That's always a good day.
But nonetheless, you will have impacted those kids' lives, and you want to make sure that it's a positive impact.
Let me end with my 3 quick questions.
Okay.
And I ask every attendee or my co-host here. So the first is, what is a book you're currently reading and would you recommend it? The second is a quote that you live by.
Okay.
And then a mentor or someone who served as inspiration in your life.
Okay. So let me start with the book, The Collector by Daniel Silva. It is a historical mystery series. He's actually married to Jamie Gangel, who is on whatever network she's on right now. I think it's CNN, but don't quote me on that. They have twins, and he has this entire historical series that cuts across history in Europe. So it's fascinating. I was a history teacher, so I love the history, and they're set in all different places in Europe, and the museums and the artwork. They're so well done. I actually read them every summer. They come out every July, and it's my favorite beach read. But I didn't get a chance to read it this past July, so I'm reading it
We
now.
kept you busy.
You kept me busy. My favorite quote is, be positive, be patient, be persistent.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay. And actually, when I think about the person that most inspired in my life, it would have to be my dad. He grew up through the Depression, didn't have the easiest life in a single family household, but he always believed in public education. And I'm sure this is not hard to believe. I was not the best student always. And he used to tell me all the time, what you have between your ears, no one can ever take away.
Wow.
And that really has always stuck with me.
Yeah. It really made an impact in your life.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a good quote too. Words to live by. Well, thank you, Gwen. It's been a pleasure and honor to have you on the show.
It's been my
Hopefully
pleasure and honor.
our
Thank you.
viewers have enjoyed this conversation. I know I have.
Thank you. I have as well.
I do want to give a plug for our spring conference. Hopefully I'll see you there. It's this Friday. So we hope to see you at our spring conference. If you need more information, feel free to log into our website, njsba.org. And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you next month on the Boardroom.